The opening salvo in a new nuclear war.
It's time for an adult conversation about keeping the lights on and pushing power prices down.
And to lead our nation away from this madness of an all renewables approach.
If the Labor Party tried this from opposition, we would have been torn apart.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And the climate wars have broken out again, with the coalition promising to build 7 nuclear plants across 5 states if it gets into power, pledging, it's not clear how, cheaper power at taxpayers' expense, and launching a programme that's not been costed and wouldn't have a power station in operation for more than a decade, which many in the media have greeted with incredulity.
Peter Dutton's nuclear plan is an economic disaster that would leave Australians paying more for electricity.
Peter Dutton is crazy brave to the point of being reckless.
Dutton is ready for a fight over his crazy brave nuclear play.
And that crazy brave verdict was echoed by political reporters on all the TV channels.
The size of this announcement, and yet no costs, no costings on the announcement. I find that absolutely extraordinary.
The states are opposed, the Senate would have to lift the moratorium, and the CSIRO warns nuclear power would cost twice as much as renewables. Peter Dutton is betting voters will ignore all of that.
While Nine's Charles Croucher, who is certainly no pole vaulter, was equating Dutton's dream with the chances of him going to the Olympics.
Having 2 plants up and running by 2037 is ambitious in the same way me wanting to compete in the pole vault at the Brisbane Olympics is ambitious. Sure, it's possible, but you wouldn't want to bet on it, and not with taxpayer funds.
Meanwhile, the front pages delivered a mixed reaction, with the Murdoch-owned Telly and Hun mildly positive, while the 9 papers in Melbourne and Sydney highlighted the many hurdles involved. And the Canberra Times, owned by ACM, rejected Dutton's vision entirely.
Fission division. Plan dismissed as unworkable fantasy.
Meanwhile, in launching his half-cooked, uncosted plan, which news.com.au said would provide only 4% of Australia's power needs, yes, really, Peter Dutton laid down a marker for the next federal poll, saying,
I'm very happy for the election to be a referendum on energy, on nuclear.
And in anticipating months of nuclear debate, former editor of The Monthly, Nick Fike, laid down a marker for the media, telling Crikey readers,
journalists who failed to interrogate Dutton's nuclear dream should resign. There is no nuclear plan, and journalists reporting the announcement seriously are participants in the charade. They're misleading the public.
And there was certainly no shortage of commentators or politicians branding the nuclear proposal a joke. Treasurer Jim Chalmers told the media,
it might be the dumbest policy ever put forward by a major political party. It is the worst combination of economic and ideological stupidity.
While Giles Parkinson, in Renew Economy, a clean energy news site, was both scathing and angry, calling it
a serious joke that is mad, bad and dangerous.
And warning it would stop wind and solar and cripple investment in new green industries. The Australian's policy editor, Tom Dusevich, was not much kinder, calling the idea deplorable and warning,
this is pure folly with taxpayers' money at this time in this way.
And adding,
the opposition leader is proposing public ownership of the 7 new power plants. Doesn't he lead the party of free enterprise and small government?
While another columnist on The Australian, which you would expect to be backing the coalition, was doubting a nuclear power station could be in operation before 2050, citing the hot mess at Hinkley Point in the UK and Vogtle in the US, which have both seen massive blowouts in time and cost, pointing out,
these extraordinary budget blowouts have occurred in countries where nuclear energy already exists, no legislative impediments are present, and where there is a degree of expertise already to be found.
And the challenge facing the coalition was clear to see on Sky News, with this blunt graphic summing up State Premier's reaction.
No.
No.
No. No. No.
With Sky allowing Labor MP Josh Wilson to deliver this verdict.
I think the best term for it would be a scam. I mean, if Peter Dutton was able to force Australia down the path of nuclear energy generation, the cost would be enormous.
But surely there were some supporters. After all, News Corp and The Australian have been barracking for nuclear power for ages. Yet even there, the pickings were slim. The Australian found 2 farmers who liked the idea and celebrated with this positive headline on the front page.
Early thumbs up in rural electorates.
Repeating the line in a big spread inside, where columnist Judith Sloan, who's normally a champion of privatisation, was calling it sensible for the government to own and build the nuclear industry. While in the AFR, John Howard's nuclear inquiry chief, Ziggy Switkowski, who will be advising Peter Dutton, was giving his thumbs up and saying the economics can be made to work. And Sky After Dark was predictably praising the coalition plan and dropping the crazy word, but still calling it brave.
Lloydie, do you think that Peter Dutton is on the right side of history with this very brave pitch to the Australian people?
Hello, Steve. It certainly is a very brave pitch to the Australian people.
It was a bold proposal, something we haven't seen from an opposition like this before.
But before long, the media focus was shifting away from the merits of nukes to the impact of reopening the energy debate, with Nine's business columnist Elizabeth Knight warning that the coalition's nuclear utopia could vaporise renewables, explaining,
"The trouble is that introducing nuclear power into the mix now also undermines the business case and the returns on investments in wind, solar and batteries that have already been made."
And Crikey's Bernard Keane was telling readers the disruption was deliberate.
It's not some unintended consequence, it's the entire point. This is peak culture war. Any economic, fiscal or philosophical logic has been abandoned in favour of the goal of destroying a hated enemy. Renewable energy, no matter what the cost.
And the risk of doing this, according to the CEO of the Clean Energy Council, is that we'll end up with an even bigger power mess than we already have.
Our coal-fired power stations are closing. Whether people like it or not, these are very old power stations. They are closing down, and we need to be replacing them with technology now, and that's why the current government is accelerating renewable energy into the system. If we don't do that, and we have to wait 20 years for nuclear power, two things happen. One is electricity prices go up substantially, and the second thing is we risk the lights going out because we don't have enough new power to replace the old power.
So, what do voters think about nuclear power, and could it be a political winner? Well, who knows? The News Corp tabloids this morning go big with headlines suggesting Australians are gagging for nuclear power, with 6 out of 10 people supporting it. But bigger, better polls say voters prefer renewables. A Resolve poll for Nine today finds 41% in support of nuclear power, while 37% oppose it. But a whopping 66% prefer renewables as Australia's source of energy, while only 8% like nuclear. And a Redbridge poll last month found nuclear power was among the least popular energy options, with only 35% support. And Redbridge's Tony Barry, a former Liberal Party strategist, says even that falls away in focus groups when they start drilling down.
What we do see is that 35-40% evaporates. The minute you start talking about it and about being, nearby or in your electorate or in, nearby your town, it just completely evaporates.
And the one issue that keeps coming up, not timing or cost, but safety.
We've done about 20 sort of focus groups on energy in general. What comes up without fail is references to The Simpsons, which is phenomenal when you think about it, a cultural icon. But the three-eyed fish comes up almost every single time.
Is that right? Because you hear this sometimes, but that's actually what people bring 100%. Up when you talk about nuclear power.
100%, yeah, it's extraordinary. I thought the first 3 times was just an incredible coincidence.
That being a reference to this famous Simpsons scene.
Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3.
And that explains why Labour MPs were flooding the zone last week with Simpson-inspired nuclear jokes and stupid memes, which the opposition was calling juvenile and childish, but which the media found irresistible.
Labor politicians and the union movement have posted a wave of attack ads online against the coalition's policy, including three-eyed koalas and fish and scenes of an Armageddon-type world.
And, like it or not, that may well be where this debate ends up, even if the coalition does come up with all those missing details, and even if the media tries to make it about costs and emissions. I guess we'll see in the weeks to come. But now to The Age, and an absurd column about a peck on the cheek.
It seemed a simple kiss on TV after the game, but it crossed a boundary.
The boundary umpire in this case being the paper's regular columnist, Kate Halfpenny, who decided this split-second peck between commentator Abbey Holmes and Brisbane Lions player Lachie Neale was not only out of bounds, but also worthy of a 700-word column, with Halfpenny reviewing the post-game action on slow-mo and finding a
cycle of discomfort, blurring of boundaries.
And dubbing the kiss, which was clearly consensual and
fast and not ick.
Decidedly
weird.
Although, in a moment of self-confessed hypocrisy, Halfpenny ruled that had it been a kiss between two blokes in the workplace, it would have been fine.
I feel if a male player got kissy with a male host during an adieu, it would be kind of adorable.
Now, as far as columns go, it could have died a silent death and we'd all be better off. But the holy grail for a lonely columnist is to be heard above the noise. And that is where this story was heading. Because 2 days later, the public display of affection was being discussed on Nine's 3AW footy show, with journalist Caroline Wilson raising the Halfpenny column and then dismissing it.
I must say, I saw it and had no problem with it at the time. I mean, it was just a peck on the cheek.
And former footy coach Lee Matthews also had no problem with it, while calling it new and unusual. But their discussion soon had the kiss making headlines on news.com.au and the Daily Mail, which were beating it up with the use of the F word. And next day, the so-called furore, which had gone unremarked at the time of broadcast, was being thrashed out on breakfast TV, with Matt Shovington on Sunrise teasing a live interview with the man behind the post-match kiss.
Check this out, the post-game kiss, raising a few eyebrows. Lachie Neale is live as his on-field kiss with Abbey Holmes causes a bit of a stir.
With Lachie Neale beaming in to talk about their weekend win and spruik a charity, but instead facing questions about you-know-what.
This kiss with our very own AFL commentator, Abbey Holmes. Are you surprised by the interest this is getting?
Yeah, I probably don't want to give too much airtime to it, to be honest.
And an hour earlier, he was appearing on the Today Show, with Sarah Arbo deciding, even though they were stirring the pot, that it was all a fuss about nothing. But that didn't stop Today pumping the story into its news bulletins, yes, really, and making it a hot topic for guests.
An innocent kiss on the cheek, or inappropriate? What's your take?
Oh my God, it's the 21st century. Where are we heading to? If they're mates.
Today was also sending its Melbourne reporter onto the streets to report on the non-story. And by then, even the Today Show hosts were admitting to indigestion.
I don't know anyone who's outraged.
I mean, I think the outrage is about the fact that there was an article written about it. It's like it's non-event, it's a non-issue, and someone's tried to turn it into one, and everyone's talking about it.
Yep, and it sums up everything that's wrong with our clickbait-led news cycle, where outrage piles upon outrage, even if it is being dismissed. With commentator Abbey Holmes understandably calling Halfpenny's column an attack on her professionalism and saying,
it's really upsetting for me. You know, Kate Halfpenny wrote the article, but does she know my relationship with Lachie? Does she know that he's a good friend of mine? Like, if she had done her due diligence ahead of writing that article, I think she might feel a little bit differently and might not have actually written it in the first place.
So, does Kate Halfpenny have any regrets about her column? None at all, telling Media Watch.
It's about a wider issue of whether women in particular want to be kissed at work. The personal relationship between those mentioned makes no difference. I would totally write the column again.
But let's hope she doesn't, because on the weekend, in the middle of the MCG, Abbey Holmes got this kiss of support from another AFL player.
Thanks, Abbey. Cheers.
And finally, to the diplomatic red carpet and last week's visit of China's premier in what the media dubbed
panda diplomacy.
Panda diplomacy.
Panda diplomacy.
Pandemonium in Adelaide.
The last being a reference to Adelaide Zoo's Wang Wang and Fu Ni, who are being retired and replaced by a younger and, we hope, randier couple. But the visit wasn't all cute and cuddly, with the media covering noisy anti-China protests on the lawns of Parliament House.
Calling for human rights to be respected.
Meanwhile, inside Parliament House, Sky News journalist Cheng Lei was facing a more sinister problem, with members of the Chinese delegation harassing the former prisoner during a ceremony on Monday by blocking her from the camera even when she moved seats and refusing to move away when asked by Australian officials. And what was it all about? As Sky's Tom Connell explained,
they were seemingly concerned, these officials, Chinese officials, about the visuals of a shot that would combine you and the Premier.
Yes, a pure but clumsy propaganda play. And why? Because Cheng Lei was imprisoned in China for 3 years on trumped-up national security charges while working there as an on-air newsreader for local state media. and was only released in October last year after months of intense diplomatic lobbying. With Cheng Lei saying of Monday's ugly incident,
"What do? Do you become like them? Also belligerent? Throw them out? Create a scene?"
In this case, the answer being no, with the journalist focused instead on the far bigger story about our two nations.
We don't want this incident to overshadow the rest of the visit, which is the real news. It's enough of a circus without me being the sideshow.
But were her bosses listening? Not at all, with the story overshadowing all other China news on next day's front pages of the News Corp tabloids, while her Sky News colleagues were also featuring the incident on programme after programme, accusing China of bully boy tactics. And fair enough, because, sadly, her shabby treatment was not a one-off, with Cheng Lei saying she was blocked from a second press event on the same day, which included both Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton. So much for mutual respect and press freedom. And it makes you wonder who is running the show on these sorts of visits. That's all from us for tonight. Don't forget Media Bites on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram. But for now, until next week, goodbye.